Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another live stream with me, Lar from Complete Test Success. So we're just doing a Q&A today, pretty straightforward. If you have any questions for me about the IELTS test, feel free to ask them in the comments and I'll answer those for you. Or alternatively, it might not necessarily be a question, but it might be some problem that you're experiencing. So you don't know how to do something, you don't know how to improve some scores, you're having some issue with some part of the test, just go ahead, explain to me what that issue is. And again, I'll be happy to help give you some advice, explain how to overcome those problems. And yeah, that's basically what we're doing today. So you tell me what your questions are, tell me what your problems are, and I'll give you some support. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Last week we were looking at speaking and we had some good participants there in that. We found a lot of the people needed to improve their pronunciation. It's kind of a challenging area to improve. So if you have any problems like that, just let me know. And I'll be able to kind of point you in the right direction. I'm a little bit late joining. I think I came in a few seconds later. So apologies for that. One mistake that I had with a student just there, I just finished a lesson with a student before I came in here to do the live stream. What she was doing was she keeps on trying to make unnecessary comparisons in task 1. So for example, there's a line graph, there are a few different lines, and she'll never just say directly like this was 40%. She'll go, this was half of the amount of this one. So she's always trying to make these unnecessary comparisons where I nearly need to take out my calculator to follow her essay. And she'll say like this one went from about half the value of that one to about double the value of that other one. And I don't remember what value that one was. And I don't know what the value of that one is. So suddenly I'm trying to do math where I don't have the information I need to even do the math. So I have to try and go back, find the category she was talking about earlier. When I find that, then I find the percentage that she said. Then I'm coming back down, getting out my calculator, figuring out the puzzle that she's created. And then I get to, once I understand it, I can continue reading. So this is something where in the question, it says make comparisons where necessary or make comparisons where relevant. And I think that's where people get this idea, is that they have to, in some way, involve like the direct comparisons between the data and what it would be if you put that into a calculator and divided one number by the other. It's not like that. It's not that complicated. Just give the data. It's much clearer. Hi, Taban. Good to see you here. If you have any questions for me or any problems, feel free to jump into the chat and let me know how I can help. Arup, hello, sir. My question is, how can we improve grammar? Yeah, so with grammar, the first step has to be understanding what your biggest problem is. So whether it's in your speaking or in your writing, what mistakes are you making most often? When we're looking to improve our grammar, for most people, what we're thinking about is if you need to get a band 7 in grammar, you need to frequently produce error-free sentences. And it might be the case that you have mistakes in most of your sentences, so you're getting a band 6. So the question then is, how do you improve your accuracy enough so that you can get a 7? That's not everybody's situation. There will be some students at lower levels where they're not using enough complex structures, so that's what they would need to work on. But I think for the majority of students, the accuracy is the problem. They have enough range. They're using complex sentence structures, but they're trying to get from a 6 to a 7 or maybe from a 7 to an 8. And the main hurdle is improving accuracy. So to improve your accuracy, you can only really do one area of grammar at a time. So if let's say we're talking about writing, for example, if I look at your essay and I see you're making mistakes with plurals, articles, and subject-verb agreement, you're not really going to be able to do all three of those in one go. So you're going to have to choose one to focus on. The narrower your focus, the more focused you are on a small area of grammar, the easier it is to fix it. If you're going, okay, I'm going to improve grammar, that's too big. Narrow it down to one very small specific area, focus 100% on that, and then you can come back and work on the other ones later. So it's one thing at a time is really important. Now, ideally, you would be working on the one you make most often. So we said subject-verb agreement, plurals, and articles. You do this maybe every essay, about 4 or 5 mistakes, 6 or 7 mistakes, about 10 mistakes. Well, okay, we're going to work on that one first. And then it just depends where you are in your journey of understanding that grammar and using it correctly. So for some people, that will be going back to the very start and taking it from, a grammar book or grammar rules and studying how the grammar works. So actually understanding how to use it first. From there, the next logical step is doing lots of reading. A lot of people go directly from looking at the rules to using it. That's a very big jump. So it should be look at the rules and then do lots of reading where you look at those rules in action. You look at what do they look like in the real world? So by doing lots of reading with a focus on, for example, if we're looking at articles, you're doing lots of reading newspapers or books or whatever you want, but you're looking at all the articles and you're trying to explain how they're being used. So it's correct. It's a newspaper or whatever. The articles in this text are correct, but why are they correct? So you're looking at the article and go, why does this article, why is it being used in this way? Why is it a, not they? Why is it they, not a? Why is it zero article? So you're asking yourself to explain all of these article usages. Sometimes you'll know straight away. Other times you'll need to go back to the rules, look at the rules again, try and figure out what's going on. But then from reading enough, you get a deeper understanding and you actually understand what's going on, how it works, why it is the way it is. Then it's time to start using it. Use it in your own writing. Focusing on getting it right, rereading your text, trying to improve it, and then seeing what mistakes you make. So it might be, using Grammarly or using ChatGPT to find those mistakes for you, figure out why you made those mistakes, what you got wrong, learning from those mistakes, write another essay and keep going on and on and on until you've improved it. And then when you're happy with the accuracy, you go back and you start on the next one. Or if it's for speaking, once you get it right in your writing, you move on to speaking. And then once you're happy with that, you're finished with articles, you're as accurate as you want to be, you go back to the next one. So maybe it's plurals you need to work on next. It's a long journey. It's not something that happens quickly. I mean, realistically, you're looking at easily 3 weeks. If you're studying every day, if you're doing 2 or 3 hours a day, one area like articles could take you 3 weeks to make the necessary improvements. And you're not trying to go from making 10 mistakes per essay to making 0 mistakes per essay. You're trying to reduce it as much as possible. So you're not aiming for complete perfection. You're likely hoping to get it from 10 mistakes per essay down to 2. So you might still make mistakes, but you've improved it enough that you can get a higher score. That's kind of what you're looking at. That's what you're aiming for. So is ChatGPT reliable to score our writing to assessment? Not yet, no. For task response and coherence and cohesion, it's not great. For vocab and grammar, it's more accurate. But what you'll find is ChatGPT's expectations of good vocabulary are quite a bit higher and a bit unrealistic. So if for example, if you get ChatGPT to write an essay, that will give you a good reflection of what it considers to be, a well-written essay. There'll be too many ideas and not enough development. So that affects the task response score. In terms of the vocabulary, it'll be written as, with the language of someone who's an expert in that topic and that's their field of expertise. Maybe they've been studying in that field for most of their lives and they know everything about it. They have all the vocab that an expert would have, but you don't need to be at that standard. You just need to be you need to sound like a normal person discussing that topic. Do you have the vocab you need to discuss that topic? Not, do you have the vocab that an expert would have? So the standard in ChatGPT is often a little bit unrealistically high in terms of vocab. But I mean, in terms of vocab and grammar, it'll find your mistakes. It'll show you, what mistakes you're making. It'll give you a good idea of those scores. But for task response and coherence and cohesion, it isn't as reliable. So yeah, it's definitely helpful, a great tool. I use ChatGPT a lot for various things. It's great in that, like, what I love about ChatGPT is that when you don't understand, you can stay asking questions. Like, what about that? What about this? I don't understand this thing. Can you tell me this in more detail? So to be able to come back and keep digging deeper is just fantastic. Compared to a normal resource where you get the information, and if you understand it, great, and if you don't, you kind of have to figure it out yourself. Whereas with ChatGPT, you can always come back and ask for more examples, more explanations, and dig deeper. But no, in terms of your question, not completely reliable. No, for vocab and grammar, yes. For task response and coherence and cohesion, no. Yeah. Okay. Hi, Coram boy. Good to see you here. Hope you're well. In writing task 2, is giving counter argument necessary to get higher scores? No, it's not. And I think it's less complicated not to do that. You might, if you were aiming for a band 9, you might consider doing it. But if you're aiming for a band 7 or a band 8, you're just going to end up making your life more complicated than it needs to be. Like, I personally would just say, if it's to what extent you agree or disagree, life's a lot easier if you just say, I agree, and here are 2 reasons why. That's just, you're going to make things a lot more, a lot easier. And not just in terms of the task response, because if you try to discuss the other side, you need to come up with an idea, and you need to develop that idea appropriately as well. But also for the coherence and cohesion, because now you're swapping back between why you agree, why other people disagree, trying to, go back and forth between the 2 sides. So even in terms of coherence and cohesion, there's an added element of complexity that isn't there if you just take one side. So, I mean, for the standard, the most common situation for IELTS candidates is they want a 7 or they want a 7.5, in which case, you're aiming for 7 or 8 in task response. And in those situations, I would say just cover one side and do it well. And that'll help you get the score a lot more easily than trying to cover both sides when you don't, in fact, need to. And in reality, it probably wouldn't even improve your score anyway. Yeah. So, yeah, good question. Hello, Hala. Welcome to the lesson. Good to see you here again. Ibrahim, sir, I heard people saying that even the question asked me to write reasons, advantages, or disadvantages. Can I only develop one idea instead of 2 in one paragraph? Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying reasons as in it's plural. They've asked for more than one. No, you have to have 2. So there will be questions where it says, why does this happen? Why does this happen? And in that case, one idea would be okay, 2 ideas would be okay, because you're saying, why does this happen? But when the question says, what are the reasons for this? And it says reasons in plural, it's specifically said, give more than one reason. If you reply with just one in that question, you're going to end up with a band 5 for task response. So yeah, if it's asked for reasons, it's 100% necessary that you give 2. For advantages or disadvantages, it depends on the context. So there are actually 3 question types that ask about advantages and disadvantages. So the first one is, are there more advantages than disadvantages? In that question type, I would say give 3 ideas. So it'll be, I think there are more advantages. So you'll give 2 of those and 1 of the other. Or it could be, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? And you can say, I think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. So you'll have 2 advantages and 1 of the other. So for those, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? You're being asked what you think. Are there more advantages or disadvantages? Again, you're being asked what you think. So for those questions, I'll go with 2 on one side to cover my opinion and 1 for the other. However, there is another question type that says, what are the advantages and disadvantages? It hasn't asked for your opinion. It's asked for advantages and disadvantages. And in that situation, you absolutely have to give 4. So in the same thing we were saying about reasons is plural, you have to give more than 1. Advantages and disadvantages, you must give 2 of each. So yeah, it just depends on the wording of the question. So it's not as simple as, it will always be this or it will always be that. The questions are worded differently. So you just need to make sure you're responding in the way the question has asked. Hey, Daniel. Welcome back. Good to see you here. Arup, sir, could you please give me a little bit of view of your online IELTS courses? And is there any discounts that I can buy? It's very expensive for me. Yeah, so send me an email and I'll see what your situation is. So there's my email, lar@completetestsuccess.com. I can give you a link to the course as well if you want to join my waiting list. The main thing for me is to make sure that you have realistic goals. And like, I turn students away from my course all the time when they're looking to join, but they have some unrealistic expectation. So like, let's say, for example, I have someone who's got a band 5 in their previous writing test and they want a band 7 in their test, but their test is scheduled for next week. It's like, I can't work magic. I'm not gonna take money from someone who I already know I cannot support. So in those situations, I just say, I can't help you. Best look in the test. Come back if you've more realistic goal or more realistic timeline. I have absolutely no issue taking on students who are starting at band 5. So that's not my problem. If you're starting at band 5, not a concern whatsoever. It's not that I won't help you if you're starting at a low score. That's not what I'm talking about at all. It's, if you're starting at a low score, you need more time to get a high score. So if you're starting at a low score, you need enough time to improve. You can't just say, I'll join your course and my score will magically improve. There's a lot of work involved in improving your scores. So, I'll point out what your problems are. I'll explain to you how to fix them, but then you need to go and fix them. And that takes time and that takes effort. So there's the link to the course. So you can either join my waiting list there, Arup, or if you just see in the comments, you'll see that link, or send me an email. Like I said, lar@completetestsuccess.com, and we can talk about it there. Daniel, how to deal with topics I have no idea in writing task 2? When people ask this question, it often turns out that they're just making things too complicated. Like when people say, I have no idea about this topic, they just kind of shut down. They see the topic, they tell themselves that they don't have any ideas. And then when it comes to actually talking about why they have no ideas or talking about it or thinking about it more logically or more realistically, they can come up with the ideas. It just takes a bit more time. Can you send me a question? Send me an example of a question that you felt was very difficult and you couldn't think of any ideas for. And there are multiple reasons. All right. Sometimes the situation will be students have found a question online. That question was reported by another IELTS candidate. They did the test. And when they came out of the test, they went onto some website and they said, here's the question that was in my test. When they write it down, they write it inaccurately. It doesn't really make sense. Then another student comes along, they try to answer it and they go like, oh, I can't think of any ideas. So sometimes the problem is the question doesn't make sense. If the question doesn't make sense, well, that could be the problem. So the source of the question can sometimes be an issue. Make sure that you are getting questions that are, reliable and make sense. And if you can't understand a question for that purpose, or you can't think of ideas because of that issue, it's not really your fault. Just don't use that resource for your questions anymore. Then other students, their language ability isn't good enough. They don't understand the question. So, if the issue is that your English isn't good enough to understand the question, well, you won't be able to answer it. Like any question, you can't understand a question. You can't answer a question that you don't understand. Even in your own language, if someone asked you a question and you didn't understand it, you can't answer it yet. So that can be another issue. But then other times the problem is just the way people think about it. They're trying to think of some kind of imaginary situation where they're trying to think of ideas like, I don't know, like maybe, I live in Ireland, but I'm trying to imagine what's going on in America, and I'm trying to write my idea from the context of, living in the country where I want to go, rather than using my own knowledge of the world to come up with my ideas. And sometimes it's just like, well, what about the people in your family? What do they think? Or, what's the situation with your classmates or your colleagues? Thinking about the real stuff in the real world and your own real experience, it's much easier to pull ideas from there than kind of like some imaginary world that you've created in your head. And it just depends. It's not always the same problem with every student. So yeah, it depends on what question you're looking at. And like I said, send me a question there and we can talk about that. Or it depends on the way the student is approaching the question. And very often then it's trying to understand what two things you're talking about. Like if the question is, there are more obese people these days, why is this happening? You need to be aware of what you're comparing. So there are more obese people these days. So we're saying in the past, 10% of people were obese. Nowadays, 20% of people are obese. So how did that change happen? So if you can get it clearer in your head that these are the two things that you're comparing, that can make it easy. But what happens with some students is they go, okay, I need to say what causes obesity. And they'll start saying like, some people eat too much food. It's like, that causes obesity, but the question isn't what's causing obesity. It's like, how has the general population become more obese? So you're comparing the difference between what happened in the past versus what happened now. So you're more likely talking about some kind of change in society rather than people eating too much. If someone ate too much in the past, they would become obese. If they eat too much now, they become obese. That's not the difference. So sometimes it's about understanding like what's the difference. What are you comparing? If you don't understand what you're comparing, that can sometimes be the problem. So like I said, it depends. It depends on the question. It depends on the student. But it's not something. It's a question that I hear a lot. My students come to me with this a lot, where they're going like, I don't know what I should say. More often in terms of the IELTS speaking test than the IELTS writing test, where people are just a bit lost. They don't know where to go in terms of what ideas to use. But generally speaking, it's the easiest, most obvious ideas is going to be the one to go with. And again, I'm not sure how to pronounce that letter. Hello to you. Welcome to the lesson. Okay, so I don't have any more questions here at the moment. We'll wait another minute or two. If anyone has questions, I'll answer them. And if not, we'll finish up. Daniel, I'm allowed to guess in questions like obesity increase that I'm not certain about the reason. No, you don't need to be right. You don't need to be correct. So the idea is the goal is you come up with an idea that's relevant. So is it about the question? And it's specific. If your idea is irrelevant, that's not okay. If your idea is vague, that's not okay. But you don't need to be correct. Like it just needs to make sense. So yeah, you would absolutely guess. Whether you're right or wrong has absolutely nothing to do with your score. It's not a research paper. It's just an academic essay. So it has to be written in that style. But no, like whether the examiner thinks you're right or wrong, whether the examiner agrees or disagrees with you, it's got absolutely nothing to do with your score. So is your idea relevant and specific? If the answer is yes, perfect. They're the only requirements. So it doesn't have to be, am I right or wrong? Is it true or false? Nothing else. There is no other requirement. Is it relevant? Is it specific? If the answer is yes to those two questions, you have the perfect idea. You don't need anything else. Hi, Adabek. Welcome to the lesson. Good to see you here. Karamboy, in writing task 2, is giving counter-argument necessary? Oh, so we saw that one already. How can I improve my writing skill? That's a very broad question. So for you need to break it down into, are you talking about task 1 or task 2? After that, break it down into, are you talking about task response, coherence and cohesion, vocab or grammar? And then focus on improving that skill. So if you're talking about vocab, you need to study more vocab. If you're talking about grammar, you need to either improve your range or improve your accuracy. If you're talking about task response, you need to make sure that your ideas are relevant and specific, like we just discussed. You need to make sure you're developing those ideas appropriately. So there's no real catch-all. One person or every person needs to do one thing. It's not just a general thing that everyone needs to do. It depends on you. So what's your situation? What are your problems? What are your weaknesses? And working on those, fixing those. So yeah, you need to figure out more clearly what it is you're trying to improve first. Yeah. Sir, would you like to come up with another task 2 video with a thorough explanation? Not particularly, to be honest with you. I've been busy. You see, the thing is as well, like on YouTube, like someone who's good at operating social media accounts, like, I have a Facebook page, I have a YouTube channel, but I'm not very savvy in terms of, how to grow a channel. But what you'll find is, like, if you look at the channels that are very successful, they basically have, 100 videos where they just keep saying the same stuff over and over and over again. I prefer to make videos if there's something new that I need to say, or there's something that I feel like I haven't covered clearly, I'll make new videos. But for the most part, if you go back through the videos, I only have a small number of videos that I've kind of gone through the most important aspects of task 2. And then what I'm doing then each week is with these live streams is to come on, try and give you guys some feedback and answer your questions as they come up, and kind of guide you a bit more, personally. So yeah, I mean, I could make another task 2 video, absolutely. But I just wonder, is it going to be the same stuff again? And if so, I don't know, maybe delete my old ones. I don't know. Look, I'm not very good at growing YouTube. Like it's a very small channel. I started it, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and I only have, I think, like 10,000 subscribers or something like that. So for like the length of time I've been doing it, most channels would have grown a lot more than mine. So I realize I'm not doing it very effectively, but I don't know, in my mind, I like the idea of having a small number of videos that people can kind of get through and learn what they need to learn, instead of having hundreds and hundreds of videos where, it's just an endless cycle of videos without really much progress for the students going from each one to each one. Arup, in reading section, I'm getting 5 to 5.5 bands. And I'm stuck. How can I improve? So it just depends why you're getting the answers wrong. You need to analyze your incorrect answers and try to understand why you're getting them wrong. If they're all wrong because of your vocab, you don't have enough vocab to understand them, well, then you need to improve your vocabulary. You need to start studying vocab. So sometimes the only way to improve your reading scores and your listening, your reading and listening scores would be to study vocabulary. Once your vocab improves, you'll understand more. And it's just that. But for other people, then there will be other types of mistakes that wouldn't take as much effort to improve, to fix. So for example, maybe you're trying to read too quickly. Like a lot of students, they want to answer all 40 questions. So they'll race through passage 1, race through passage 2, and race through passage 3. And they're getting answers wrong because they're trying to go quickly. And if they slow down a bit, they'd end up getting more right in passage 1 and passage 2, and maybe not finishing the full test. So like, maybe they would only answer 35 questions and they didn't get to even look at the last 5. But they end up with a higher score because they spent more time on the easy questions and getting those. It just depends. So figure out what you're doing wrong. So for every incorrect answer, like after you do a practice test, spend like an hour or even 2 hours looking at every incorrect answer and trying to figure out what went wrong. And, let's say like, here's the correct answer. Here's the answer you chose. How did that happen? Why did that happen? Once you start to understand those more deeply, you'll be able to fix them. So you have to find out your mistakes first. You can't fix a problem if you don't know what the problem is. So just analyze your practice tests in more detail. Atabek, you're very welcome. My pleasure. Daniel, also very welcome. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Doesn't look like I have any more questions today. So we'll finish up and I'll be back next week. Next week for another live stream. We'll do most likely same time, Wednesday at the same time next week. So until then, take care of yourselves. If any of you guys have IELTS tests coming up, best of luck with that. Bye.